Hi, hello, and thank you for being here. You are currently listening to an audio reading of The Forest, written and now currently being read to you by Jasmine A. Golphin. Thank you so much for checking this out, supporting this work. I'm very excited to present it to you and to get my little, audio book voice going for you. Hopefully, you'll enjoy these smooth 93.1 WZAK tones. This is a Cleveland production, if nothing else. I wrote The Forest. I started writing The Forest in January of 2023. At the time, I was really just exercising an idea that I thought should have been a film, and I knew I didn't have the budget to make a film. But in the process of writing it, I've been thinking a lot about literature as a medium, thinking about, I totally was a book nerd growing up, and then like a lot of people kind of fell away from reading as often, and now I'm trying to get back into that. But also thinking about like if I lived in a world where I couldn't make films for whatever reason, like I currently do now, but also in a world where maybe that technology didn't exist, what would I still be doing? And it dawned on me that like ultimately I would still want to be telling stories, that sort of campfire around with your friends and family, setting a mood, reflecting real life, processing real feelings through imaginative, speculative worlds. I've been tapping back into that. And so that's what this project represents. And that's why I'm very grateful that you're here to support that work. If for some reason you have stumbled upon this and don't know who I am, my name is Jasmine A. Golphin. You can type that name into the internet and you'll find my website and you'll see all kinds of things I've done in the past. The short version is that I am a visual artist. I'm a storyteller. I love the idea of being able to use art as a way to connect to one another and communicate beyond maybe just words. Today it'll be all words though. If you would like a PDF version to read, that is available on the website. Again, jasmineagolphin.com. In addition, there will be some sounds pumped in throughout. So if you think you hear birds or weird low rumbling, that is intentional. The vibes of this story are creepy without being jump scary. I think there's some moments that are particularly gross and otherworldly. Your results may vary. I would say similar in vibes to The Twilight Zone or Are You Afraid of the Dark or John Carpenter's The Thing or Dimension 20, if you're familiar with that show on Dropout Gang. I'm pretty sure that's all we have left. Again, thank you for supporting this work. And without further ado, I would suggest turning the lights down low, getting cozy, imbibing how you so choose, and getting ready to enjoy The Forest. First, some prose to maybe set the mood, if you will. 1. Welcome now to an alternative world, a parallel world where our fair city divided to north and south rather than east and west, and the rest of the world responded in kind. 2. Humanity believes in straight lines. Nature does not, is not. Even the geometric lines of bismuth still spiral out. We do love to go against our nature, though. 3. Vulnerability that only possesses fear. Nothing fun or sensual. There's no awakening, only arrestment, terror, control. A white underbelly, unprotected and supple. There's fear, yes, so much of it. And he, worse than the usual creature, something far more unpredictable and desperate. I'm not sure if there will be more gnashing or less. I'm not sure which is worse. And now, the forest. Seven people stand silently at the edge of a forest. In front of them, an endless sea of evergreen. A dull, dapple light coats the forest bed. It's a dense and lush valley. The leaves seem heavier here, thicker even. If anyone standing here had been fully conscious, they would have felt a wave of awe at their reverential beauty. Behind this line of silent, semi-comatose people is a narrow road that eventually makes its way back to the highway. It's mostly a cut through that the locals know about, and even then, local drivers that depend on GPS to get anywhere usually avoid it. The nearest street sign is a few miles back with a reminder to use headlights at night. This patch of woods isn't the kind of place that someone would casually stumble upon. There is no sign of any sort of vehicle that might have dropped these seven off. It is 6:32 a.m. A thin fog dissipates into the morning light, and seven strangers stand perfectly still at the edge of the forest. They are expressionless, as still as statues. They have no commonality in their ages, genders, or races. Faces you would pass without a second thought. Kathy, Jay, Peter, Amanda, Tasha, and two more with names lost to time. The seven aren't in sync, but they all breathe and blink in a slow, private rhythm. They stare ahead into the forest towards a singular point on the horizon, a slow, blinking light at the bottom of a shallow valley several miles away. Impossible to see with the naked eye. They cannot see that light, in fact, but they know it's there. And just a few hours ago, they each felt compelled to find that light. Miles away, too far to see, but not too far to walk. An incredibly low, pulsating signal had been going off for the last few days. One that these seven didn't know that the other could hear. Not many people could hear it, but the ones that did made their way out here, or at least tried to. It was a straight shot, just walk directly towards the source. Nothing else mattered. A whisper, quiet, anticipatory signal calling them all home. But then, just now, the pulsating noise stopped. Slowly, the seven felt their minds fight back, this synchronistic train of thought finally breaking down. Jay and Kathy look around. Peter, 9 years old and the youngest one here, takes a few steps back and begins to cry silently. No one else moves just yet, but the paralysis has broken. Tasha starts to speak and then cuts herself off. It takes too much to focus. She puts her hand in her pocket to find her phone instead. A low industrial churning revs up far on the opposite end of the forest. It's a huge and sudden noise, impossibly full. An indistinct mechanized choir roars to life with steady confidence, a series of engines turning on all at once, a million saws and 1,000 heavy drills rhythmically punching in and out. It all blurs together like this. The blurring industrial churn is worse than the signal, stronger, faster. The last moments of Tasha's conscious mind does its best to cut itself off from this pull, or more accurately, protect itself from it. But there was not much that she could do. She couldn't pull her phone out, only managing to blindly tap at the screen in her pocket. The industrial sounds slowly merged into a singular low hum, the first roar of some long-forgotten mechanical stone beast coming to life. The hums build into a dark cacophony that takes over the forest. Birds call out in response as they fly away. And it is in this hum that subconsciously cues all seven to step into the forest. 3 days have passed. 3 of the most agonizing days and nights for the loved ones of the 7 missing. From Claire, we hear that it's been 3 days of pleading, asking with everyone I know to just keep an eye out, to just let me know if they see Kathy. And from Kevin, we hear that it's been 3 days of driving around everywhere, trying to understand how this could happen. From Sunny, it's been 3 days where I have had to be reminded to eat and to sleep, and I do neither. And for Brianna, it's been 75 hours, 22 minutes since I started falling. It's been every hour since the disappearance. Time has altogether slipped from her purview. Every minute since she realized Tasha hadn't come back to bed has smeared into the next. It's been a dark wave, thick, suffocating. There wasn't supposed to be an emergency like this so early in their marriage. The absurdity of this pain is something beyond Brianna has ever known. Sharp, tearing at every cell. Nothing makes sense. An impossible grief. Anyone Brianna would lean on now lives 2 states away. They had just moved here last month. Tasha was going to go to Target this weekend for a bunch of little things they still needed. A bunch of little things Tasha was going to do and now isn't doing. And she was right here, right there. And what in the absolute fuck? Brianna tries to think. She tries to plan. Nothing computes. She drives around. She makes the posts. She takes all the calls and the texts and the concerns. New flyers are engulfed in an ocean of other missing person posters. No one can help. Brianna spends every waking moment pulling herself from the abyss so she can find Tasha. It is the only thought that propels her through this hellscape. On the 3rd day, the South Cleveland Police Department holds a press conference. Brianna didn't know other people went missing in the same hour Tasha did. The cop she filed the report with didn't mention it. Neither did the police detective who promised to keep her updated. Thank God Tasha's parents had the bandwidth to follow the news. Brianna had tried at first, but quickly had to turn it off. All it did was feed her worst thoughts. At the end of the call, she thanked Tasha's parents profusely, and they thanked her for all the looking she had done so far. When she finally hung up, Brianna cried a hard cry of confusion and fear and fell asleep completely drained on the floor in front of her couch. So on this 3rd day, Brianna, pulled together enough to look presentable to a cop, makes her way to City Hall, using Tasha's missing persons poster as a 6th sort of entrance pass. The press conference is held in an ornate atrium just beyond the front desk. The ceilings are high. A deep red and gold crisscrossing relief frame the skylights. The floor is a beautiful light mauve marble. Brianna's sneakers lightly echo in the space between as she approaches. There's a growing crowd of loved ones, local politicians, and assembling camera crews. Brianna recognizes a popular megachurch pastor speaking to a crying woman. Not quite consoling, but certainly speaking to her. Brianna takes out her phone to snap a picture and send it to Tasha, an act that is cut short with a visceral pain shooting through her chest. She wipes away tears as she makes her way through the crowd. Now, Brianna is sitting in a seat waiting for the conference to start. She doesn't remember finding this seat. It's like a time jump, she thinks. Disassociation, something she hadn't done since college. Once she's sure of herself again, Brianna looks up and takes in the room. She's immediately struck by the cacophony of thoughts that seem to spill out from the crowd around her. I've barely slept. Have you called the news yet? You gotta call them. They'll just ignore the comments and the tweets. My baby went missing last week. Take a look at what she was wearing. Someone said they saw him with a few of his friends, but they don't know shit. I just don't get it. People don't just disappear. Except for when they do, Brianna replies without thinking. The people around her give a questioning stare, but she doesn't notice. Truth be told, Brianna can't take in any more information than whatever it takes to focus on the speaker at the mic. The room settles as the press conference begins. A few councilmen and public officials stand around the perimeter of the room. The preacher sits in the front row with the journalists and some admin from City Hall. The citizens make up the rest of the crowd, concerned family and friends with the same sick hope Brianna is anxious with. At 9 a.m. sharp, a fastidious, imposing man, the South Cleveland police chief, with a shiny bald head and jet black mustache, steps up to the podium. He shuffles papers he'll never refer to, makes a quick nod to an aide next to him, another nod up to the news cameras in front of him, and finally, his eyes to the assembled audience. Thank you all for being here today. The South Cleveland Police Department first and foremost wants to extend our deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of the missing. We can't imagine the toil these recent and admittedly baffling events have had on all of you, and we are working tirelessly to get to the bottom of this. As it stands, we've been able to reunite 14 of the total 27 missing with their loved ones. The bodies of 6 victims were discovered Sunday evening, within hours of first being reported missing. Despite what you may have read on gossip blogs and social media, the grim details have been greatly exaggerated. What we do know, however, needs to be withheld as the investigation continues. He continues on, saying nothing Brianna didn't already know from Tasha's parents. Most of the press conference focused on the 6 bodies and the most general details. Either Sunday night or early Monday morning, 27 people went missing. 20 were found, some in a semi-conscious state, and the rest dead. And that's it. Nothing about the missing 7. Nothing about Tasha. Brianna was barely holding it together before this started, but standing in a crowd listening to the only person who could know what's going on say nothing substantive about the love of her life really just drained whatever the fuck she had left in her. It was reassuring, perhaps at first, to be with other grieving people, but that feeling faded fast. Everyone there had a story about a missing loved one, and everyone wanted to tell it. She could only nod solemnly so many times. If there were right words to say in these exchanges, she never found them. Still, Brianna stays to listen to the entire press conference, simultaneously not believing the police chief would say anything helpful, but convinced that if she left early, she would definitely miss something. A sick punchline to a sicker joke, she thinks. As the conference ends, a small group of desperate loved ones swarm around the podium. The police chief, an officer, and a city admin stand in a V formation, polite to the growing crowd, but slowly cutting their way to the door. Claire, a worried and primly dressed woman, holds up her phone to the officer and then to the chief, who barely glances as he passes. There's a picture of Kathy making a funny face on a sunny day. "Look again, please, just look," she asks in a near whisper. Claire's husband motions her towards the door. "He saw it, Claire. Let him get to work," he says. The officer gives a courtesy glance and nothing more. He moves with her husband towards the door, but Claire won't move from her spot. The 2 men exchange a brief look and the cop nods. He steps towards her, now noticeably more gentle in his tone. "I understand what you're going through," he reassures her, "and I promise we are doing the best we can. There's just not much to go on. That might be hard to hear right now, but keep in mind, sometimes people take impromptu vacations. Maybe she was stressed out about something you didn't know about." "That's not Kathy, sir. She would always," Claire starts to explain. Her husband steps up and puts a hand on her shoulder, just a step below patient. Cop nods professionally, but gestures them towards the door. "Stay at home, stay by your phone. I'll call as soon as I have anything for you," he tells Claire. Claire, caught between the 2 men, finally puts her phone away. She nods thank you and leaves with her husband. Sunny and Fee walk away, faces down, looking at their endlessly scrolling phones. Sunny is a lanky, forever slouching kid drowning in a well-loved black hoodie. Fee is compact and bold, very intentionally dressed to look as casual as possible. That's all he had to say? Sonny mutters. What did you expect? I told you it was a waste of time, Fee retorts. Her head is down, fingers flying expertly. She's in another comment section, launching another rant to an insensitive troll. The rest of the comment section is on her side this time, and that's the best shot of endorphin she's had in a while. Sunny stops walking, and it takes Fee a moment to notice before she turns around. She raises an eyebrow of confusion at them. They sigh, beyond exhausted. Jay was usually here to balance them and Fee out, and that realization starts to make Sunny cry. Come on, don't do that. It was the first update anyone has had in days. I had to come, Sunny mutters sincerely. Fee's cynical defense drops at once. Oh no, shit, I'm sorry. She closes the distance between herself and her best friend. Sunny nods and they hug. That was shitty of me. I just really want to rip that damn mustache off, Fee continues. Sunny gives a gentle chuckle. He's for sure dying it, Sunny says dryly. The two weary friends giggle as they head to the parking lot. Will, lean, young, and impatient, stands by his pickup truck, debating if he has enough time to run over to the convenience store before his wife, Sarah, makes it out to the parking lot. There's no way to tell, of course, not with her family. Your aunt is gonna pick a fight, he warned her before they left the house this morning. I know, but I have to talk to her about Peter. No, you don't, he replied and immediately regretted it. But he knew she just wanted to make sure her aunt didn't do something stupid in public, and there was only so many ways for Will to explain that wasn't Sarah's job. They fought for a while about this. A stupid fight, really. He knew it. And now she's talking to her aunt, or fighting with her too, and Will desperately wanted a cigarette. He didn't want to start up again in front of Sarah, mostly because he didn't want to hear her nag about it. But she was probably pulling her dramatic, bitchy aunt into some quiet corner so she wouldn't make a scene in front of the mayor right now. He's got at least 15 minutes. Plenty of time to run over to the corner store and back. And smoke. Will considers this a bit longer before calling it. If he were a more reflective man, he would have been unable to ignore how terrified he was for his young missing nephew, Peter. Instead, he runs across the street, keeping any tragic thought from settling in. Kevin, a burly, middle-aged man, stands outside the bathrooms looking for a quiet corner to call his wife. He's slowly looking around, really, more so dreading what he would even say. I am too big a man to be shuffling like this, he thinks absently. The passing thought makes him straighten up. His wife had been almost catatonic, worrying about their daughter these last few days, but he knows she would still want to hear from him. What would he even say, though? What could he say? He takes a deep breath and checks his phone. Thankfully, she had texted first. Not much of a press conference, huh? Kevin smiles, the first smile of the last few days. Kevin, Will, Claire, Sunny, and Fee. These five had no way of knowing, but for the sake of the audience, it may be worth mentioning this. At the end of each of these moments, they all made a secret, declarative statement in their hearts. I will find you. Some said this in direct words, others felt it or saw it in their mind's eye. It's not a hopeful thought exactly, more of a practical statement of fact, an understanding of a future so clear and sudden that none of them even question it. I will find you. Schrodinger's truth. Alive or dead, here or anywhere, I will find you. And it's in this conviction that a power unknowingly grows. Not quite a spell or a prayer, but in knowing this truth so clearly, there is a vibration, a collapsing echo, an alignment of intention, a response to that pulsing signal in the forest, perhaps. No one can say for sure, of course. It could have just as simply have been a coincidence that all five decided to exit the same direction, away from the crowd. This truth is as likely as any other. For whatever reason there may be, each of them make their way to where Brianna now sits, staring at her phone. Brianna was the first to leave the press conference, having broken away from the crowd as soon as she got the sense that the police chief was wrapping up. She sits on the sidewalk of the parking lot, a joint slowly burning in one hand and her phone in the other. It was nothing, literally nothing. A period sent at 6:32 a.m. from Tasha's phone. No words, no pictures, no pin location, nothing. Brianna stares at this dot for a really, really long time. She all but jumps when a man in a loose-fitting suit passes by. He backs up a step as an apology for scaring her, then points back at City Hall. You probably shouldn't smoke under that no smoking sign, he says. Brianna manages not to look startled as she snaps back to reality. She goes to put it out and then stops. He's taking out a pack of cigarettes. She tries to read his face. Maybe he's being a dick, or maybe he's just trying to be funny. Are you going to arrest me? A grieving wife? She replies dryly, gesturing below the no smoking sign. The man looks over and sees a missing persons poster of Tasha that Brianna had just taped up. The man sighs sympathetically and hands her a card. No, just a heads up. If the cops hassle you, feel free to give me a call. And don't talk to them. Brianna gives it a quick scan. You're a public defender? He shrugs in humble agreement. Can you explain to me what the fuck that was then? Brianna asks. She expected him to laugh and is taken aback when she sees the public defender genuinely consider that question. He looks off towards the sky as he talks. On some level, it's the same old shit it always is, right? True crime wouldn't be a genre if cops were actually good at finding people. But folks go missing for a million reasons, and it doesn't matter who you are, cop, a private detective, or, and here he gestures as Brianna as he finishes, a loved one. You still need something to go off of, and no one seems to know anything. Brianna looks down, taking in this truth. I told him about this text, though. I told him about the text the same morning and no one's followed up, she almost whispers. The public defender takes a step forward, leans to see the empty message and the contact name. That was the last thing you got from your wife? Yeah, no note or pen, but it's something, right? Her voice is small, exhausted. Possibly, he replies. Probably. Look. He takes a deep breath, rephrases. What if it's not that they won't go looking? What if it's that they can't? A pause to consider. He sits down next to her, takes out a cigarette. She passes him a lighter. He nods in gratitude. Finally, she asks, like they're not allowed to look into it? Allowed is too concrete of a word. I only know what I overhear, and they're pretty careful not to say too much around me because, well, I end up telling people like you. He laughs at himself as he takes a deep drag. Brianna watches him carefully, not sure what to make of this man. He's probably crazy, but at least he gives a fuck. He continues. 27 people all disappearing in one night is definitely something, no matter how much the cops want to downplay it. Finding 20 of those people, dead or alive, is nothing to sneeze at, of course. But that also means they must have some idea as to what's going on here. He points to the text and then looks directly at her. If I were you, I would look into that yourself. Maybe find a techie friend who can help. Don't be stupid, of course. Don't be a vigilante then, she replies. My free legal advice would be to not take the law into your own hands and become a vigilante. No. But, and here a small smirk grows on his face, you can always ask questions and check things out. She returns his gaze and smiles. It's the first in 3 days. Of course, she replies. Kevin reaches the parking lot as the public defender stands up. He points to Kevin as he starts to leave. Oh, you're one of the fathers, right? You good with phones? Maybe he knows something about pulling location info from a text. Location info? Brianna asks absently. There's a small ring of recognition in the back of her head, but the thought doesn't fully connect. Kevin registers at the last possible moment that the public defender is referring to him. Yeah, there's usually some kind of location information attached to a text, Kevin says. Brianna is still gripping her phone. The text is still open. She didn't drop a pin, though, Brianna slowly responds. Yeah, but there still might be something in the metadata. He makes a gentle gesture towards her phone to check it out. Tasha did say something about metadata once, Brianna says as that recognition starts to settle in. What did she say, though? Brianna tries to focus on that day. They were on the couch. Maybe they were in bed. Try as she might, the memory just won't congeal. There's too many other feelings vying for her attention. Do you mind if I take a look? Kevin asks. She shakes her head, but she doesn't hand it over just yet. There's something about letting go of this last piece of Tasha. Kevin, a man with 3 sisters who is aware of how his size might be perceived, takes a step back. No pressure, of course. What's the text about? From some automatic place deep within her, Brianna responds. Tasha sent this after she went missing. Kevin freezes. Brianna takes this moment to stand up. She sizes Kevin up and recognizes that frozen look. Strangely, she's comforted in this sharp shared pain. She puts out her hand. Brianna, Tasha is my wife, she introduces herself. Kevin, he says as he meets her hand. He struggles to find the words for the rest of this introduction. Amanda is the one who's missing, my daughter. All the typical niceties Brianna had ever heard run through her head, and they all exhaust her. She shakes her head and goes for the most direct thought. Sorry to meet you under such shitty circumstances. Kevin laughs ruefully. Brianna hands Kevin her phone. Will, Claire, Sunny, and Fee make their way to Brianna. Conversation swirls at once as Kevin asks everyone within earshot for advice on retrieving metadata. The teens, Sunny and Fee, get to work at once, finding step-by-step instructions in a minute. Claire asks everyone their experience since their loved ones went missing and find they all hit the same wall when it comes to gaining any insight. Will, smoking his cigarette at long last, is able to pinpoint where the location is on a map. He pulls it up to show the group and they all nod excitedly. It is the first clue they've had in days. Brianna is in a daze watching this all unfold. Poof, pucked right out the sky, Brianna finds herself thinking. Eventually it was her time to talk, and she found that weird sense of familiarity had turned acrid all of a sudden. This all felt weird and off, something she just couldn't pin down. Yeah, that's grief for sure, but there was something else. It's over by Whittier Forest Valley, 30 minutes south from here, Brianna says, not breaking away from the screen. Hey, Brianna, Kevin calls to her. He might as well have been on the moon. Yeah. You gonna check it out? What if we headed over there now? Brianna pauses. What are we doing here? Launching a search party? She thinks. All there is a black dot and some text saying that her phone was last connected to some satellite here. Not even Tasha's phone. Tasha could still be right around the corner. Her phone and wallet could have just been stolen, or I have no idea what this even means for real, Brianna finally says out loud. You should let the police know, Will suggests. Brianna laughs ruefully at the thought. Claire looks over at her, considering all that cackle could mean. Will looks on confused, and Brianna finally just shakes her head. Yeah, sure, I'll probably go check it out, but not in any official way, Brianna responds finally back to Kevin. What time were you going to check it out? Claire asks. Brianna takes a step back. That familiar feeling washes over her again, and it makes her recoil. I'm not trying to make this a group project, though, Brianna starts. Why not? Will jumps in. Because I don't know you? And besides, what do you expect to find? And the thought that she had been avoiding all day bloomed inside of her with a sudden, sharp violence. What did you expect to find, Brianna? Something warm, dark, and patient asked from within her. That Tasha might be dead in some shallow grave somewhere? A dark wave washes over her all at once. The people around her continue to protest in her silence. Brianna hears none of it. Whatever energy she has left is being consumed by the worst images her mind can conjure. She stands up wordlessly to leave. Sorry, we really aren't trying to push, Kevin starts. This is the first lead any of us has had. It's not even a lead, Brianna says flatly, from somewhere far beyond her body. You gotta have some hope, Will replies in a way that reminds her of a cartoon character, almost chipper, clueless. There's something really exhausting about hope, Brianna spits back. That freezes the group. Brianna sighs. Look, I get it, but this is barely anything. I'm just gonna take a walk around the area. Nothing more. No huge search party. No one getting their hopes up, okay? I'm gonna take a look, and I'll let you know if I see anything. I promise. Let me be alone, okay? This isn't a field trip. This isn't a search party. I'm just gonna walk around the woods aimlessly and exhaust myself so I can finally sleep tonight. Please, don't put your hopes on this. The pause hangs. No one is sure what to say. Finally, Kevin just shrugs. I don't know. That sounds good enough to me. I just want to be exhausted enough to sleep too. Brianna almost laughs at this. Just enough to break the tension. And besides, you can't go out there by yourself. You know that, right? Kevin continues. Brianna stays silent, but after a beat, nods. You gotta trust somebody at some point, he finishes. Slowly, the rest of the group chimes in. It's best we fan out anyway. Cover more ground, Will suggests expertly. We have some snacks in the car if we're leaving right now. It's not a ton, but we're down to share, Fee offers. And a case of water in the trunk, Sunny adds. Are we going right now? Can we make a quick stop at the store to pick up some things? First aid, bug spray. Claire starts a list of basic hiking essentials. A plan hatches. Brianna watches on. Eventually, the conversation wanes as they realize Brianna has checked out. She feels their stares. Brianna didn't want anyone she knew to see her like this, hollow-eyed and disassociating. She puts her hands over her face and looks up to the sky. A tear rolls down the side of her face, accompanied by a long, sad sigh. Some sick joke of realization dawns on her. At least these strangers don't know her any other way but disheveled. It can only get better from here. She takes a deep breath before she finally speaks. I want to be home by 8 o'clock, she says. The group nods in simple agreement, and the process of swapping numbers begins. An hour of planning later, and now Brianna stands in the middle of a convenience store, debating if she wants an energy drink or not. There's something about the bright, false lighting above that makes this moment feel all the more surreal. Just as she decides she can't make one more decision today, Sunny walks by. If you drink one right when we get there, you'll probably crash by the time you get home. Brianna considers this, nods, and grabs the drink that's advertised as boldly infused with the power of a double espresso. Elsewhere. 2 weeks before, 27 people went missing in one night, and 7 of them walked into the forest. Dr. R was flying over the same patch of forest, headed towards Fort Cogner, a military research laboratory that ostensibly studies crowd shyness in the surrounding forest. I'm being shipped, thought Dr. R absently. This isn't flying, I'm being shipped. Out loud, he mused to his assistant Travis, how fast do you suppose we're flying tonight? Travis, young and unsure if this was some sort of trick question, took a moment to answer earnestly. At least 200 miles per hour, he replied, and then immediately wished he used metric. As a cover, he quickly added, They certainly want us there fast, sir. They certainly do, Dr. R replied amicably enough. Dr. R had already decided weeks ago how he felt about his new assistant, and it was about on par for how he felt for all his previous assistants. A 1 a.m. phone call with a voice on the other side trying desperately to convey confidence. An unmarked car pulling up to Dr. R's home 9 minutes after he hung up. A briefing from some private or intern or whomever that restated what little he had learned on the call, and now he's being flown in, shipped, on a whisper quiet military helicopter rushing to Fort Cogner. They certainly wanted him there fast indeed. Dr. R is not a man of particular physical note. He doesn't possess the kind of vanity that makes him want to hide his receding hairline, for instance. Like other acclaimed scientists before him, Dr. R's wardrobe is really just a uniform: a pale blue button-down, khakis, brown shoes, belt, and tie. A look that communicated competence and portrayed nothing notable. Maybe if his area of study had been more pedestrian, he could have got away with the unkempt mad scientist look. But his doctorate in biomechanics and innovations in living buildings required that he looked at least presentable and reasonable. It's in this train of thought, as he's being flown towards his one true passion at the heart of these woods, that Dr. R found himself thinking again about that dark rainbow shimmer. He didn't get to see much of it. There had been too much fire and smoke and chaos and screaming that night. But what he did remember came back to him vividly, a reminder as to why he was being shipped and why it was worth it. The first time he saw the other side was during a 1992 lab explosion at an undisclosed research facility in or near Texas. His first lab assistant, Perry Wilmore, was hit with the brunt of the explosion. A storm of glass and shrapnel flashed at his arms and torso as he screamed for help. Dr. R was the only other one in the lab that night and on the other side of the room, so ultimately only suffered superficial burns from the explosion. The concussive force from the blast did knock him hard into the wall across the room, though. His ears would ring for years afterwards. But the burns Dr. R did receive only happened because he decided he couldn't look away from what was happening to Wilmore. The blast had knocked Wilmore into the opposite direction, crashing into a 10-foot tall electromagnetic power source, the Binks engine. The Binks engine was ostensibly a vertical standing motor encased in a proprietary ionized material Dr. R had patented. Wilmore's impact shattered the glass exterior of the engine. Shards of glass rained down on him as intense and a beautiful fire roared between the two scientists. Neither of them had been able to stop the engine in all this chaos, and so it too continued to spin as well, cracking with blue sparks of lightning and spreading the fire wildly across the room. A wave of nausea rose in Dr. R as the concussion set in. He had just enough wherewithal to spread his body against the floor and crawl towards the door. And then, time slowed down. The fire's roar became a distorted low rumble as flames danced and then merely swayed. The glass that tore away chunks of Perry's body became like snowflakes, airy and light. The shards gently made their way down to a bloodied floor and a dying man. Dr. R watched as the smoke above him began to move like clouds on a lazy afternoon. He could still move, but he could feel time around him crawl to a near standstill. And then something that took Dr. R years to comprehend. Something opened in front of the motor of the Binks engine, or maybe it came from the engine itself. An impossibly black, floating oval, perfectly devoid of light. Something that crackled with its own shimmering electromagnetic sparks. Something that tore through every inch of the space around it, growing from a pinprick to the size of a football in seconds. Something that pulled the glass and the fire, and finally Wilmore himself into itself with one extended inhale. And Dr. R couldn't look away. In fact, he was jealous that someone as undeserving as Wilmore was going to see where it all led. So Dr. R, lying right next to the door, hearing the footsteps in the hallway of potential rescuers, propped right underneath the fire alarm, did not call for help. Not at first. He didn't call out to the lab partner he had just had lunch with that day to warn him to give Wilmore one last chance. No, instead Dr. R used what remained of his concentration to sit up, lean his body against the door, and watch. To observe and report on this black void as it tore at the room around it. the other side of that dark rainbow. "We're landing," his latest assistant remarked, bringing Dr. R out of his memories. Dr. R felt that wave of nostalgia pass. A simple reminder that nothing else mattered. He had to go back. It was just that simple, and being shipped in this fashion with such urgency and a need for his expertise only proved that he was right about that all along. The loved ones of the missing seven drive to Whittier Forest Valley, with Brianna's car leading the pack. The density of South Cleveland gives way to sparsely spaced, humble mid-century homes of the outer suburbs. The roads rise and fall as the land becomes hillier, almost mountainous. Occasionally there's a store, church, or gas station that act as the last spots of communal humanity before it all gives way to the woods. This is the edge of developed society, as it were. Brianna's weirded out by all of this. Yesterday, she was the most alone she had ever been in her life. Now she's leading this bleak as fuck parade into the unknown. But what else was there? Sit and wait until someone in charge gave a fuck? One would think a foreboding day like this would be overcast with dark clouds and chilled winds. Instead, the sun shines bright and warm in a clear sky. Huge lazy clouds hover above. Bright afternoon sunlight cuts through the blur of homes and trees passing by, creating sharp, dark shadows in its path. A mix of evergreen and deciduous trees crests over the horizon as Brianna gets closer. The GPS pings, instructing her to turn left at the upcoming crossroads. A right turn would just mirror the left, nothing else around her now but tall, swaying trees for miles and miles. In front of her, a closed road leading off to a blocked-off tunnel, all of which is still surrounded by miles of foliage. "Less than a minute away," the GPS declares as she makes the turn. All at once, Brianna's stomach drops, and her mind floods with the worst images of Tasha possible. Tasha's body mangled and distorted, sinister plant overgrowth breaking Tasha's skin and muscle and sinew. A flood of overlapping images Brianna's helpless to stop. Tasha, beautiful, soft, and smiling, turning green and sallow and sloughing away in front of her. It's an impossible wave, drowning every cell Brianna can feel. "Hey, are you okay?" Kevin gently knocks on the window of her car, startling her back to the present. There are lines of tears on her shirt. Some unconscious part of her body must have parked the car. That same part must have made her start crying as well. She has no sense of how long she had been sitting there crying. She doesn't look up at Kevin, but she nods to reassure him. Some part of her screams that the moment she looks up, it'll be so much worse, so much more vivid. Tasha's body will be right in the middle of the road with a dark halo pulsating around it. She will be dead, and that will be sure as soon as Brianna looks up. "Take all the time you need," Kevin calls from some place outside of her car, a million miles away. "We're going to huddle up over there for a minute before we head in." Brianna doesn't look up from her steering wheel. She can't look up. Kevin gives a moment before he walks back over to the group. "She all right?" Will asks as Kevin approaches. "I mean, obviously not," says Fee, rolling her eyes. "She's probably having a panic attack." Will tries to interject, but Sunny cuts in first. "I don't blame her." "Of course not. Hell, I don't want to think about it too much," Fee begins before Will finally breaks in, raising his voice loud enough to just be heard over the two of them. "I was just making small talk. Shit. Calm the fuck down." The two teens look at each other and snicker. Kevin skips over all of this and makes eye contact with Claire, who is purposely ignoring the attention. "I think she'll be all right. She just needs a minute," he tells her. Claire nods and looks over at Brianna, who's still in her car. Brianna is unable to move from this liminal sense of safety. She closes her eyes to the world. The darkness is welcoming, one less sense for her mind to process. The tears haven't stopped, but they have slowed down, falling without much effort. "I need to talk to you," she whispers, eyes shut tight. She says it again before a sharp pain of missing Tasha could settle in. Repeating it made her lean back in her seat, but her eyes stayed closed. This is as close to sleep as she's gotten in the last few days. I wish I could talk to you. There's something about saying it out loud, like a prayer. I don't want to be the one who finds you, Brianna feels herself say. The truth of putting into words startles her. She reflectively opens her eyes, inadvertently taking in the setting finally. Outside to her right, she can see the group putter around. Beyond that, it's just two black lanes of roads sandwiched between two forest lines. It crests ahead to a small hill, cutting off her ability to look too far into the horizon. No way to see the world beyond the space right in front of her. No way to predict what's next. It was true. She didn't want to be the one to find Tasha, but something about that alternative starts to churn inside of her. A new press conference presenting Tasha as the latest 5-minute tragedy. A sad face plastered on some stranger appointed to break the news to her. A series of nameless officials, of experts telling her that there's nothing they could do. A series of strangers at work performing mournful niceties long enough to get you out the door. Tasha's body presented to Brianna for final confirmation in a vast and sterile room. Tasha, cold, alone, and uncared for. Brianna takes in a deep breath and looks out to the forest. It's as still and ever present as always. She takes another purposeful breath. I don't want to be the one who finds you, but she trails off, her words replaced with a memory of her hand, a handful of love and tenderness, gently caressing Tasha's face. She can't be sure. There's no way to be sure, but she has to at least check. Please be okay. I'm coming. Just please be okay. And with that, Brianna finally steps out of her car. There's an unspoken expectation that there should be some sort of ceremonious moment before the group enters the woods, but really, what would it even be? Logistics had already been discussed, phone signals checked and working, snacks, water, and basic hiking supplies divided amongst them. The six pair off, with no one more than 50 feet apart from another. The day is bright and warm. Birds chirp along as they do. A perfect day for working up a sweat with friends. Just a normal walk in the park, Brianna mutters sarcastically as they head out. The group won't notice this at first because their pain is too deep and focus too spread. But everyone feels a chill in the warm air as they enter the forest. Kevin rolls and stretches out his shoulders, unable to loosen the knot at the top of his spine. Claire, who is paired with Fee, keeps clenching her jaw and periodically finds herself grinding her teeth when she gets lost in thought. Will, who is paired off with Sunny, makes his way further ahead at a pace that won't let him stop. He goes out of his way to break through the thick branches and occasionally kicking overgrowth as he trudges through. He will not slow down. Both teens and Brianna's stomach turn. The teens go over a litany of cheap fast food they had recently that could have caused this. Brianna clears her throat and coughs, not because she really has to, but because there's something in her that wanted to know how it would echo across the woods. The sound comes back hollow, more of a whisper than an echo. There are birds and there are bugs, but there are no mammals. There is no pollen. The trees are solid and stable, an illusion of normality from afar. But that's only because they can't move. The world out here is still, waiting until the people enter. Not much of a nature girl, huh? Kevin asks as Brianna trips over her third root. I don't hate nature, she ducks beneath a heavy branch. I usually just keep my distance. My wife and I enjoy a nice hike on a paved road. This is more forest than I'm used to, Kevin chuckles to himself. Brianna nods but doesn't give it much more. She's careful to keep scanning the ground, to keep looking for some sign of Tasha. The six walk in a sprawling line, taking their time to scan the area for anything that stands out. Brianna and Kevin paired off to the right. Claire and Fee take the center. Sunny and Will take the left. Everyone is a bit staggered, and Will is the furthest out from the group, perhaps intentionally looking for some harder terrain to climb over. But no one ends up more than 20 feet apart from someone else. And in each group, one looks high and the other looks low. After a few minutes, the group gets close to where the underground tunnel begins. A tight link chain fence runs parallel between the tunnel and the wood line. Didn't notice that from the road, Brianna says, grateful for any kind of small talk. Kevin nods as he eyes how far it runs. Looks like it runs the length of the tunnel. Okay, but what's all the way out here to even fence off? Some hermit's private property is my guess. Off on the other end of the line, Will catches a simple rhythm as he makes his way through the brush and branches. Sunny trails behind, grateful to take it easy in Will's wake. Neither tries for small talk, just a brief conversation where Sunny confirms they'll do a second pass of the area for clues as Will tears a path. The world for Will is effectively a blur of greens and browns as he relaxes his vision to look for anything that stands out, doesn't belong, or anything that just isn't the color of nature. It's an effective strategy up to a point. Sunny watches Will give the occasional double take whenever they pass a bright leaf or odd shadow. It's in this blurring technique, though, that tips Will off that something is shifting about the forest. Every few yards, there's a spark of deep blue-green amongst the leaves and the pine needles. Not on every tree, but just enough of them. These leaves and needles hang heavier, and the group is only about a half a mile into the woods. Will breaks a twisted branch in front of him, causing a large, wet leaf to slap him across the face. Gah! Will screams as he stumbles back. The leaf is an inch thick and falls apart in clumps as Will claws away at it. He flings down a snotty chunk of blue-green membrane from his eyebrow. It lands right in front of Sunny's step. Hey, watch it, they exclaim. I couldn't see it, Will yells back. He flings off the last few pieces on a tree next to him. The deep teal chunks of chloroform almost glow in contrast to the dark bark. Is there anything left on my face? He asks desperately. Nah. Do I look okay? Yeah. What the fuck was that? Sunny wonders. Claire and Fee move towards the woods, more like Brianna and Kevin. Fee looks high and Claire looks low. They take up the rear, the base of this loose V shape with the rest of the group. They look the most like they're on a stroll. The sky is so clear today, Claire says. Yeah, weird for this time of year, Fee answers, intentionally talking about nothing too complicated. After a long silence, Claire starts up again. I like your shoes, she says, pointing to Fee's black and white chunky sneaker. The fat, flat laces are red and pink, a vaguely retro style. They look comfortable, she continues. Yeah, they are. Thanks. Jay actually got me the laces. Jay? Claire asks. My cousin, Sunny's friend. They're the one we're looking for, Fee explains as she looks out ahead. Speaking mostly to herself, she mutters, they wouldn't just disappear like that, under her breath. Claire catches it, though, and a wave of relief hits her hard. I said the exact same thing about Kathy, Claire exclaims. My husband just ignored me, and I think that cop did too. Said she could have just taken a trip somewhere or something. Without telling me? Impossible. We send each other funny videos and inspo posts all day on like 3 different apps. Claire breathes a little harder after that spiel. It's the most excited Claire has been, and it takes Fee back a bit, but eventually she nods in agreement. It's weird, and I'm so sorry they're gaslighting you like that, Fee starts. That instant sympathy surprises Claire. She waves Fee's implication away and softens. Oh, I don't know if he's gaslighting me exactly, Claire begins. Fee cuts her off immediately. Oh, he definitely is. That cop, too. Fuck them all, really. Everyone's got shit to say, but no one else is out here looking with us. Fee launches into a diatribe that she's clearly written in that comment section before. Claire tries to cut in a few times. I don't know. He means well, she starts, but Fee doesn't miss a beat. He means well, but does he do well? Why are you all doing all this emotional labor by yourself? Maybe. I just think Claire starts before pausing and sniffing the air. Wait, do you smell that? The randomness of that question finally stops Fee. She watches Claire turn around, checking the air, trying to source where that scent is coming from. It's almost inky. It smells sharp, if that makes sense, Claire reports. Fee turns towards the wind, which is coming from deeper in the forest. A small breeze passes, and Fee can smell it too, like car oil in a hot garage. It turns both of their stomachs. While that scene plays out, Kevin stops at a tree and motions for Brianna to keep going. I feel like a bear, he mutters to himself as he grabs the tree with one hand and twists his body back and forth. Brianna waits for him despite his insistence. After a moment of watching him struggle, she takes a step forward. Smell your armpit, she suggests. What? Is that your way of saying I smell? Put one hand on your head and gently pull down to your armpit. It'll help. He pauses to consider and then laughs. Okay, sure, yeah. He does that, holding it a few seconds to appease her. And now the other side, she instructs. He obliges and then relaxes. Okay, that is better, but there has to be a better name for it, he says. Brianna laughs. Yeah, probably. Tasha would know what it is. It takes her a moment before she realizes she's unconsciously gesturing further into the forest. I meant to ask earlier, did your wife have the same symptoms as the others? Symptoms? Brianna asks. I don't know what else to call it. Amanda heard weird pulses and was sleepwalking in the days before she went missing. Apparently a bunch of folks who were found did too. Oh, no, I don't think she heard any pulses, Brianna starts, and then a thought. Pulses? Walking into walls? A memory cuts through the fog. It only happened twice, but the look in Tasha's eyes struck Brianna. Or the lack of look in them, as Tasha never broke her stride across their living room, never noticed the solid white wall in front of her. Tasha was only startled, no harm, no foul, and they both laughed about it afterwards. It was like she was sleepwalking in the middle of the day. She just walked straight ahead, Brianna remembers. Amanda did the same thing when we dropped her off at her dorm last weekend. Walked right into the stairs of the front door and had to grab her arm to keep her from falling on her face. My wife was honestly terrified when Amanda said she heard a pulsing. She wanted to watch Amanda overnight, but Amanda insisted she was just zoning out. I didn't think about it again until I saw that other press conference with the found folks. An older lady, she described it like a beacon pulling her in some direction. A chill wind cuts through their conversation, causing the leaves and the branches and the blades of grass to sway together. It's in this long gust of wind that everyone finally notices the heaviness of the bluish leaves and the oily mechanical smell coming from deeper in the woods. There has been a shift, a bloating in the body before death, something that drains and mutates the life around it. The group makes its way deeper into the forest. There are dead mammals at the outermost ring of this new forest. They died in a moment of escape, mid-run, claws stretched out, skulls with open jaws and frozen screams. Will discovers the first set of bones when he hears the crunch underneath them. He crouches down to get a closer look. There's overgrowth all around it, but none on the skeletons. It's a chipmunk, picked clean, he says to himself. He picks up one of the bones. It's clean, but it's not clean enough, and he puts it in his bag. Yo, the fuck, my guy, Sonny exclaims. What? I'm just gonna take a closer look at it when I get home. Will grabs another a few feet away. After a few more yards, there's a third set of bones, this one a little misshapen. Something resembling a small femur sticks straight up in what seems to be a pyramid of tiny bones. That singular bone is larger than the rest. Growing out the top are 3 or 4 small nodules of bone matter lumped together. Will, ever the hero of his own story, goes to pick this piece up, but it's stuck. He tugs at it a few times. It's like a weed or ingrown, he says as he continues to pull. Sonny slows down as they watch this moment unfold. Will plants himself and pulls one more time, causing the bone to slowly stretch to the height of his swing. The stretched bone material tugs at the weight of the mass of the rest of the bone on the ground. Sonny, understandably, freaks the fuck out. Hey man, put that down! Will is lost in this moment, his mind trapped in the worst kind of 90s pizza commercials with a nauseating cheese pull. He pulls it up higher and higher, needing to know how far it'll go. This bone material is more stable than cheese, but it's the only thing his brain can fit in that space. The rest of the bone mass finally lifts from the ground. Sonny jumps back and yells. Fee and Claire look over in Sonny's direction. Brianna asks if Kevin heard that. Will stares at this stretched monstrosity in wonder. What might have been the individual bones of some squirrel or chipmunk had fused together. The plant life underneath the mound is long dead. Will eyes the taffy long bone piece, turning it around like spaghetti to get a good look. His hand is well above his head before the stretched bone finally breaks, the ends curling in on themselves like hot melted plastic. They all move through a manageable but consistent overgrowth. There is no roads or path to use. Kudzu wraps around the branches. Moss and grass compete for space between the trunks. Every bit of plant life is encroaching on another. The best any of them can do is take their time and scan the area for clues. It's a weird, slow pace. Brianna lets her mind wander. There's a forest out in Utah or something that's actually just one giant tree, Brianna throws out from nowhere. What? Kevin asks, lumbering carefully against the uneven earth. He leans a hand on a wide, weathered tree, considers what Brianna just said, and then eyes the tree nervously. It looks like a normal forest of skinny trees with like gray bark. In the fall, the leaves are really pretty gold, but they aren't trees. Those are the roots of a single tree. It's all connected underground. Scientists still don't really understand it. They both are a little too quiet for a little too long considering this fact. So, Kevin finally says slowly, then could any forest be one big living organism? They look at each other. The forest around them is as it ever was. After a beat, Brianna looks around. Did you really have to ask that? Why did you share that fucked up fun fact? Kevin exclaims. I don't know, she yells back, mostly, though not entirely, joking. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. Well, thanks for sharing, I guess. Claire and Fee look to where Sonny yelled from and then at each other. Fee shakes her head disapprovingly and heads over without a word. Claire turns towards Brianna and Kevin to loop them in, but then stops. There's a tree directly between them, and in it, a bright blue and white scarf is caught in the branches. Claire doesn't pause, doesn't need a second look. She just shrieks. She's sure it's Kathy's. Brianna and Kevin hear the shriek and make their way over to her. Their shoes kick through thin white roots that sometimes stick to their soles. Neither notices at first, their attention duly elsewhere, but these thin white roots come from every tree in this part of the woods. Claire runs over to the tree without a second thought. She puts her book back down in front of the tree and measures herself against the height of the branch. It's been 16 years since cheer practice, but her yoga routine isn't anything to sneeze at. She could scale up 15 feet to that branch, no problem. Never mind that she's never climbed a tree before. Brianna and Kevin reach Claire on her third attempt at scaling the tree by running up full tilt, using her bag as a step, and flailing her arms up to reach the scarf. She's a good 3 feet away every time, barely reaching its orbit. "Oh, sis," Brianna says with deep sympathy. Kevin tries to stifle a laugh. Claire is too focused to notice. "It's Kathy's scarf. I don't know how it got up there, but I promise it's hers." The pair look at the scarf. It's a bold cobalt blue, not yet sun-bleached or worn by the elements. But it also seems to be woven into the branch almost. A few of those white roots are here too, growing from the length of the branch and covering the scarf like spider webs. Kevin approaches, offering Claire a boost, while Brianna looks around on the ground for a rock. She finds a rock before the two can get coordinated. "Okay, y'all, duck," Brianna commands. Kevin pulls Claire aside as Brianna winds up. She misses the scarf, but hits pretty close to the branch, knocking the scarf down. Claire leaps to catch it as soon as she can. Sunny, Fee, and Will make their way over. "What's going on?" Fee asks. "Wait until you see this weird shit Will found," Sunny adds. Claire grips the scarf tightly, unable to look away or acknowledge the question. The rest of the group looks at one another curious. The cops and her husband all told her not to have too much hope. They told her to be calm, to not be rash. "Are you sure that's your sister's?" Will asked. There was a time when Claire would have smiled as she answered him. A time when she would have felt a need to reassure him of her intelligence, to placate. But something in Claire snapped the moment she saw the scarf. And in this moment, that performance of social niceties was a million miles away. She growled at him. Everyone stares at Claire. Brianna takes a careful step forward. Did you just roar at us?" Brianna asked gently. Her tone brings something back to Claire. She shakes her head slowly. "No, Claire pauses, reconsiders, takes a breath. Everyone is looking at her, but no one is judging her too much. Claire runs her fingers through her hair. "I mean, yes, sure, I don't know. This is all taking a toll on me. Sorry," Claire continues. Her grip on the scarf hasn't changed, and she turns to Will, still angry. "What do you want me to say, though? Here's the receipt?" "I thought you'd have a picture or something," Will replies as he rolls his eyes. "She just got it. She showed it to me on FaceTime when she bought it. I didn't think I need to screenshot it for you." "Don't bite my head off. I was asking logistical questions here." Claire doesn't reply. She just looks back at the scarf. Will stops pushing it and turns to Kevin. "We should probably call the cops," Will suggests. Claire replies, however, distantly. "But this wasn't that hard to find." "Huh?" Will replies. "We've been barely out here 45 minutes. She absently picks off a few white thin roots as she works through this thought. "The cops never looked." "Maybe they thought it was too overgrown," Will offers. "But this is what she was last wearing," Claire interjects impatiently. She looks down at the scarf in her hand. Yes, she could see the overgrowth. Thin new roots had started to burrow their way through the threads as if it had been lost in that tree for some years. But Claire knew the scarf was new. Kathy had FaceTimed her in the middle of shopping to show it to her. Claire had a skirt she thought would look good with it, and she was debating whether or not to lend it to Kathy or just borrow the scarf for herself. And now here it is in her hand, only frayed in pieces where small bugs burrowed themselves into the fabric. Brianna watches this all, deeply sympathetic, and maybe a little jealous, she realizes. She watches as Claire tenderly cleans off the scarf and put it around the neck. She has proof, real proof, something she can hold, Brianna thinks. Her thoughts cut off with a cleaver. Her body, suddenly detached from reality, walks away from the group. Hope turns into something sick and nauseating in the pit of her stomach. She focuses what little attention she has on taking deep breaths. Kevin sees her as she leaves and follows after. Hey, are you okay? He asks. No. We can stop. Yeah. She sits down at once, her back against the widest tree closest to her, her eyes closed. Looks like you're having a panic attack. Have you done everything on the list? Let's check, friend. First, pick 5 things you can see. Yeah, bitch, I know, thanks. It was Tasha who was the one that made that clinical checklist talk actually make some sense. Who's in your ear? Where are you at? What's on your heart? Tasha knew all that somatic stuff. Tasha was the one that taught her that throwing a little ass could be therapeutic. Tasha. The grief hits in a sharp, cold wave. Kevin sees Brianna's body shudder. He starts to say something, but what could he offer? Don't worry, this isn't a wild goose chase and you won't find her dead out here. She'll be fine, just like Amanda, and this was all some great cosmic test, and we passed. Instead, Kevin finds a spot a respectable distance away and sits down too. Brianna doesn't notice him until she gets to 4 things you can feel. She opens her eyes and expecting to see him staring at her, ready to explain why she just fell apart. But Kevin looks up at the swaying canopy of the forest, feeling his own fresh wave of grief. The two sit like that for a while. Brianna can faintly hear conversation and footsteps coming from the other group, but not much. What she can hear very well, though, are the birds. They are frantic and yelling over each other with a confused urgency. It strikes her odd that she hadn't noticed at first. I guess I know who's in my ear, she laughs quietly to herself. Kevin looks over at her, not quite hearing, and Brianna shakes her head. Kevin nods and looks back to the sky. Tasha would know what to do right now. Brianna lets herself cry at that thought, and she keeps listening to the woods. It was an idyllic day by all accounts. Blue sky, cool breezy, perfect for all the walking they had planned. Things sounded normal if you didn't take into account the birds. Normal to her at least, but there was something there, wasn't it? A mechanical hum, faint, something she definitely didn't hear over their footsteps when they were walking, but now... Are you ready to get up? Kevin asks as he stands up. Wait, Brianna replies with one hand up. No rush, of course, Kevin starts. Brianna puts up her hand again. No, wait, listen. Do you hear that? You gotta be real quiet. And so they were. And there was something, all right. A low industrial rumbling, a man-made sound. Kevin turns to her. What the hell is that? A train? Out here? Nah, it might be a factory, but we're too far off for that too, right? I would say so, Kevin responds. Brianna stands up, dusting herself off. Can you tell where it's coming from? She asks. They both hold still again. What is it, Lassie? What do you hear? She thought randomly with a smile. It's coming from that way, south, Kevin finally says. He points in the direction, but he could have pointed in any direction and it would have been the same to her. Just more impossibly dense forest. On and on and on. So, should we go check it out? He asks. Brianna looks towards the sound. She can almost see where the underground tunnel would let out. Someone has to be over there, she concludes aloud. Maybe they saw something. It's 2 weeks ago, and the military's mark on this strip of the forest was obvious to Dr. R from the height of the helicopter. Straight, thin lines cut through the earth, the old world, leading to the valley where the laboratory sits. You could mistake those lines for oddly drawn boundaries, the result of some sort of hyper-specific land dispute. And in a way, that would be right. The helicopter landed with that whisper quiet efficiency that the military is known for. The pilot managed to find a spot near the police line in front of the underground tunnel. Smoke billowed from the depths of the forest, mixing with the clouds in the night sky. The police milled about, stand with importance and authority, but no desire to go further than this spot. Dr. R smiled at this sight as he stepped down from the helicopter. Easy work. The police chief was a little too pleased to be the first to greet Dr. R. "Thank God you're here," the police chief offered with an intentionally firm handshake. "Sure," Dr. R replied blankly. "Right. So, here's what we have so far. The smoke is a result of what seems to be an explosion in sub-level 1 of Fort Cogner. We discovered 2 males fused to," Dr. R cut in, "despite your district's best efforts to conceal this site as previously agreed." Yes, unfortunately. We are still investigating how they entered." The chief paused to take in Dr. R's tone and added, "Sir, it looks like they used some sort of industrial bolt cutters at the north gate. They made their way into the building," Dr. R cut in again, "my laboratory, which, since its closing, had been secured with this cheap gate and a no trespassing sign, I take it," Dr. R remarked dryly as he gestured towards the tunnel. "Hey, listen," the police chief began, right as Dr. R cut to the chase. The humble-looking scientist took an impressively quick step forward towards the chief, closing the distance between the two men by an uncomfortable amount. "No," Dr. R nearly hissed. No, you listen. I built this thing. I know what happened here. I know what that smoke hanging in the air means. I know you and this bumfuck district fucked up. That's why you shipped me in at 1 a.m. to handle it. Yes? So, let's skip to the end." Dr. R takes one impossible step closer. The chief could feel Dr. R's hot, stale breath with every word. "What came through, and were you able to stop it?" The police chief held perfectly still, too big and too old to be physically intimidated by this man. But there's something about Dr. R's tone that made the police chief think of his father, and made his tone retreat a little bit. "So I don't have to explain what happened to their bodies?" "The bodies of the intruders?" Dr. R asked impatiently. "No, just save some samples before destroying the remains. I only need to know what came through." The police chief nodded and took a step back. What he had to report made no sense to begin with, but now he found himself worried about putting it all into words. "Well, so most of the responders described a black orb of some sort, a lot of electricity, and some sort of large dog. It's all over the place, if I can be honest." And before the police chief can explain what he heard that night, an eager and frazzled cop interrupted. "It was a huge Doberman, but with a long, sharp mouth, and the officer explained. He was sweating white as a sheet. He kept looking back behind him into the forest." "A sharp mouth," Dr. R perked up. "Was it pointed like a beak?" Yes, the cop stammered. "And it almost swam through the air. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe I didn't see its feet. I don't know." "Keep going. Did it attack anyone?" The police chief broke in before the cop could answer. "Officer Daniels has a concussion, Dr. R. Sir." "He's speaking fine," Dr. R snapped. He returned to the cop before the chief could respond. "How many people did it attack?" At least 12 from what I could see before I ran." Dr. R looked back out to the smoke in the air. It moved at a normal speed. "The orb is stable, I take it," Dr. R concluded. The chief simply nodded, knowing that he couldn't add anything more helpful than that. Convenient. For a 5 year period starting in 1993, Dr. R took part of a series of news interviews. Ditzy anchors and curious journalists all wanted a story that was simple and spectacular. And soon he learned charming these faces meant that he was charming the public at large. So, if there was, for instance, some bill that needed to be passed or new drilling to be done in that protected forest, Dr. R met with the public in this fashion and reminded them all of the potential this work holds. From the 1995 episode of 2020. It's estimated that 64% of all Americans work in a building that was inspired by his style and innovations. He's an architect, a biomechanical scientist, and a highly sought after consultant in a variety of business sectors. And you've probably never heard of him. His latest project is this entire building and an undisclosed government facility. And here we cut to the journalist wearing a blindfold as he's led into a car with blacked out windows. The cameraman is then pushed down by another man off screen. And it is something of a marvel. Every material that goes into its construction, from the wires to the concrete, to the insulation to the tiles, is all designed to synchronize with Dr. R's proprietary Binks engine. Here we see B-roll of a standard office, a perfectly nondescript building. Taking cues from cellular biology's ability to heal and adapt to environmental changes, this building is the future of working spaces. Here we cut to a sit-down interview with Dr. R in one of the laboratories. Dr. R spent the few minutes before recording helping the producers set up the lab to look camera-ready, rolling out beakers they'd never used and displaying computers that usually act as glorified calculators. Dr. R made sure to straighten his own appearance as well before he began. A true living building is simply the next step in evolution. An obvious one, at least to myself and my team. No matter what we build, what we innovate, we will never be able to duplicate the complex system of the natural world. It's a marvel, really. One I think the general science community and our very own government both managed to underestimate. My career has been built on the curiosity of what the animate can bring to the inanimate. And here we cut to more B-roll of a very average government building as Dr. R continues. How can the electric pulses we find in the brain inform communication systems in the workplace? Can biology teach us anything about storing energy over extended periods of time? What is it about the molecular structure of skin cells that create a perfect barrier from water and debris? So, something like a living building, then, the journalist asked, repeating Dr. R's term carefully. Simply that, he responded. The voiceover continued. It's not just a company town, but a singular company building. And it won't just be built to be a part of the environment, but an extension of the environment. Employees will be able to live a self-sustained lifestyle for almost 18 months at a time. And at the heart of it all, the Binks engine, Dr. R's cold fusion pride and joy, with an energy output of up to 3 times as much as it consumes. The segment ends warmly, and we cut to glamour shots of the building and some animated mock-ups. Everyone is fearing the worst. The forest does not care. The forest will go on. No wonder it was worshipped. There's no order, no time here. An endless sea of green with its own life and behaviors. The forest does not care, but it does live. It will find a way to live. It will get sick and die, and something new will grow. It adapts. The group comes down to the gates. Down below is a wide valley that's been chiseled into the center of this forest. Maybe this was a glade once. The dirt pit is arid and gray, more dust than mineral. The pit gently slopes to a depth of nearly 40 feet. Two rows of work lights flank the north and south ends, though none are on, and Brianna suspects they're only bright enough to get the job done. It's the only full thought Brianna has as her mind takes a minute to process the surreality of what is dead center in this pit. A simple, effective, brutalist building. Recessed windows of dark glass, a ground floor just a few feet higher than the other office floors. An office building. An absolutely normal, unassuming 5-story building. Well, what the fuck is that? Brianna says, looking out at the building jutting out from the middle of the forest. Will takes a few confident steps forward, but his voice shakes a little bit. I have no idea. An office of some sort. Obviously, Fee says, rolling her eyes. Sunny mouths the words, "be nice," to Fee, and then taps her shoulder with sudden recognition. This has to be that military base, Sunny says. Claire takes out her phone and pings the location. That's definitely not a military base, Kevin says at once. And I thought it would be further out, not dab snack in the middle of the forest like someone just dropped it here, Fee says. Claire looks up from her phone. It's not on the map, you guys. What? Brianna says as she takes a step closer to Claire to see for herself. Will adjusts his backpack and steadies himself. I'm going down there. How? Fee asks incredulously. Slide down the embankment, Will tells her with confidence. And we're all just gonna do that? Fee asks. It's not that bad, he responds. Brianna finally looks up from Claire's phone. There's gotta be easier way in, my guy. Brianna looks around. If there's a building, that means people had to get in it, right? Kevin gestures to the tunnel. That's likely the entrance. Then maybe it's not really blocked off then, or maybe they went through there. They all pause at Brianna's suggestion. There's probably a footpath near the tunnel, Sunny says with a shrug. And so they all head over to check it out. Will runs out ahead and reaches the fence before anyone else. I think the tunnel empties out over here, he says, pointing south. Meanwhile, Claire's eyes are glued to the ground to her right as she approaches. Down a small embankment near the fence are two bodies propped up against each other. The group is too far away to make much else, but their shapes are undeniable. Claire lets out a scream before she can stop herself. Everyone else turns in her direction and then follows her gaze. Brianna freezes cold. Everyone exchanges looks. Everyone felt that fresh wave of sickening sorrow. No, 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 no. The word repeated so many times that it became a single note in Brianna's head. They're soldiers, Will calls out. She's sure she heard wrong. Brianna calls back. What? They're in uniform. Marines, I think. The uniform's different, Will responds. There's a confused look amongst the group, and wordlessly decide to walk over. The first thing they all notice as they get closer is the stench. Their steps are all slowed as the acrid smell reaches them. Thank God we're downwind, Fee mutters. What even is that? Claire asks. Brianna runs through a list of possibilities and none of them quite fit. That's not what a dead body smells like as far as she knows. It smelled more like mildew. There's a saccharine pheromone underneath that mildew, a pungent artificiality. Jesus fuck, she breathes out. The group takes a few steps closer and then stops, unable to bear the stench. Will puts his shirt over his face. Don't come any closer. It's really bad, Will starts. But I don't think they're one of ours. Those bodies have been here for ages, Fee adds. It looks like they bled out a while ago. They probably sat against the gate waiting for help, Will continues. Brianna takes another step. Now the details were coming into focus. Two young men, white, an arm missing on one, legs of the other shattered. There should be blood. Why wasn't there blood? Don't get too close, Claire calls out. That ship had sailed. Brianna had to see, had to know why there wasn't any blood. Thousands of thoughts as to what that could be. Of creatures that consume dead human flesh, of creatures that tear off arms and shred legs, but do they drink blood too? The air is beyond foul. Her eyes are watering. She kneels down anyway, mere inches away from the dead men. She looks them over, taking in every gruesome detail for some reason. She was never one for the gross and morbid, but this was something here that was going to lead to Tasha, and that's all that mattered. She would stare directly into the sun until she went blind if it meant that it would tell her what happened to Tasha. She looks the men over. Their eyes are sunken and wide open, staring into eternity. Their weapons are at their side, seemingly not helpful against whatever did this to them. She couldn't be sure if the legless one on the right still had his head fully attached. She didn't need to know that. But there was something else. Brianna crouched down to get a closer look. Behind them is the skeleton of what could be a dog hanging from the fence by its mouth, biting through the gate and right where the two soldiers lay. As if the animal had spent its final moments trying desperately to tear them apart. Those white roots have taken hold here too, fully cocooning the body in an aged and complex version of the same webbing Kathy's scarf was covered in. A compulsion comes over Brianna as she touches a piece of the webbing on the fence. The roots have the texture of wet spaghetti and give a bit with her touch. Brianna picks off a piece, only about an inch or so, and stares at it. A thin, clear ichor slowly drips out from either end. Brianna rolls it around in her fingers a few times, and then she yelps as the roots burst all at once. A white pus seeps out, and immediately her fingers tingle with tiny pinpricks. Instinctively, she wipes her fingers on her pants and then cleans her whole hand with several pumps of Purell. The tingling stops, but her index finger feels a little numb. All of that happened in a matter of seconds, too fast for her brain to truly process. She is outside of herself, but she doesn't have time to think right now. "Kevin!" Brianna almost whispers as if she might wake the dog creature. It takes a couple of calls before he hears her. "What?" "Come look at this." "Why?" "Not the bodies, this thing on the gate." "I can see it well enough from here." Brianna stands to survey the distance. He's right. He can see it from where he's standing from about 20 feet back. She turns back to the creature, and the fresher air hits, knocking some sense into her. She's way too close to all this shit. Yeah, right. Let me back up," she mumbles. What the hell am I doing that close to whatever fuck that was? It drew her in. She hates to admit it. When have I ever been a, "oh hey gang, let's check this out" kind of person? But how else do you explain it? She takes 2 more steps further back, now behind Kevin a bit. "I don't know why I got that close," she mutters. They make their way towards the building at the bottom of the valley. At the gate, there's a one-man security shed outside the tunnel that, like everything else, has been long abandoned. "It looks like no one's been here for years," Claire says in wonder. "We just looked this place up on YouTube," Fee says, holding up her phone. A 30-minute video titled "Ohio's Creepiest Mysteries" is paused on the screen. A ton of crazy conspiracy videos? This lab was related to the military somehow. "What happened to it?" Brianna asks. "No one knows really," Fee answers. "The money ran out and the lab was shut down a while ago. I guess they just left the building here." "Of course," Brianna remarks. "Well, how do we get in?" Kevin asks as he looks around. "There's just a bunch of dead plants, right?" As he approaches the gate. "We can just..." He gestures to Sunny and Kevin. "Here, grab that in." and they make work tearing away the brush and the bramble. Brianna watches on and then lets her eyes wander up. The concrete building looms in the near distance, perfectly nondescript. It almost fits into the landscape like some giant stone hill. It almost fits. Conversation peters out as they reach the building. Everything about this fucking place was off. She considers talking to the group about how she feels, but where would she even start? Hey gang, sure feels spooky here, right? Like walking by a carcass? That gray rectangular slab cutting into the bright blue sky looms over above her ominously. It's got real bad vibes, doesn't it? Claire says from behind Brianna, startling her a bit. Yeah, actually. I wasn't gonna say anything because I don't know how to put it into words, but Brianna looks back at the building. The sun is starting to fall behind it, creating a long shadow over the group. Yeah, bad vibes. It's too clean, Sunny says wistfully, looking up at the building. Brianna looks back and now taking both it and the surrounding area in as a whole. The lush, dense forest gives way to a denser, almost bloated forest that comes to this dying center. And at the nucleus is what? This pristine office building? You're right, Claire says, taking a step back. You'd think there was some sort of overgrowth or graffiti. The windows aren't even broken, Kevin mutters. Brianna stands up and makes her way towards the double doors. The sun is set just low enough in the sky that the reflection hits the glass and makes it impossible to see through. There's probably never been a time of day where you could really see through this glass, though, she thinks aloud. Near the door is a simple sign, Fort Cogner Research Laboratory and Applied Sciences. Brianna leans her head on the glass door, cups her eyes from the sunlight, and tries to see inside. Hey, wait! Kevin jumps up instinctively. Why? Brianna asked, still peering inside, unaware that she only felt comfortable enough to reply just above a whisper. It was as if they were disturbing a sleeping giant. Brianna's hunch was right. The glass a near opaque brown, leaving details hard to make out. What she could make out was unremarkable, a standard issue office lobby. She turns away from the building and looks around. It almost feels like an invitation at this point, she thinks aloud. Does it? Kevin asks, bemused. Brianna wipes off the dirt on her pants and looks up at the building. We know our people were last seen at the wood line 5 miles back. A 2-hour walk is long, but it's not impossible, and I guess it leads to this? She looks from the building to the group. I hate to say it, but we might as well see if there's at least someone in here, Brianna concludes. Had the teens kept watching the videos on YouTube, they would have been recommended a video by Our Abandoned Trips. In it, the duo Brad and Tad, not related, tease their upcoming location, an abandoned military facility. Or a research lab, Tad interrupts. Right, it may be a research lab, who knows? And then in unison they say, that's why we're gonna check it out. They had only found the Fort Cogner Research Laboratory and Applied Sciences on a fluke. During their summer road trip to explore the dead malls of the Midwest, they found a 1995 map of the area at an old diner. Ted had been the one to notice that Fort Cogner was on this map, but not any online map. That tidbit was the singer for their next episode. The duo never did reveal exactly where they were going. A pity. 2 weeks and a day ago, the pair arrived in town ready to shoot their next hit. They made short work of hiking through the forest, capturing great content for their channel as the sun set. They followed the same underground tunnel our group does now, which led them to the gate that surrounds Dr. R's former laboratory. They used a simple crowbar to break in and made sure not to record that part. And eventually they found the chamber and the other side. It was that calamity that called Dr. R out of his sleep and had him shipped to his old laboratory at 1 a.m. 2 weeks ago. The inside of this laboratory and office building is pristine. '90s era decor, magenta couches, and a front desk made of deep cherry wood. An impressive first sight. The roaring sound they heard earlier is coming from somewhere deep in this building, but the soundproofing in this lobby muffles it. There's a vaguely military looking seal on the front desk right below where a receptionist would sit. "Hello?" Will calls out. The group lingers near the door, waiting to hear back. Nothing but Will's soft echo returns. "The door's open easy enough," Claire whispers. Brianna steps in, and after a beat, the group follows. A few more steps, and a row of white, bright fluorescents flicker on. "Generators?" Kevin wonders. "That would be my guess," Brianna replies. She approaches the front desk expectantly, as if some grinning, eager receptionist will pop out once she gets close. But no one. An empty chair and a sleek computer monitor with no one there to operate it. "Maybe she's on break," Brianna jokes. "I doubt it," Will replies, taking her seriously for some reason. He makes his way around the back of the desk, just as the teens reach the elevator. The elevator chimes eagerly as the door is open, a sound that echoes just a little louder than Will's voice did. The group looks at each other and then at the doors. "Someone's gotta be in the building, right?" Brianna asks the group. They nod and head over. As Sunny and Fee argue about which floor to go to first, Will takes a peek through the window on the nearest white door. "See anything?" Brianna asks. "Nah, the glass is too reflective. Just this ugly mug looking back at me," Will shrugs. "But the lights are on back there too. I can see that much." He makes a face at the glass and then heads over to the elevator. And on the other side of the door, Dr. R looks up from his notes just in time to see Will pass. Convenient. As the group heads upstairs, Dr. R goes down. The two underground floors to this building were colloquially known as the Chamber, a 400 square foot round concrete room that held the latest version of the Binks engine. Sublevel 1 granted access to the observation deck above the chamber. Dr. R heads there first, already envisioning the code sequence he needs to enter. When he was here 2 weeks ago, when those YouTubers broke in and made their way to the chamber and set off this series of events, Dr. R couldn't have imagined things would come together so quickly. The final version of the Binks engine opened a small entrance to the other side during his time in this lab. Barely a crack and violently unstable, it hissed and crackled with the same electromagnetic sparks. And that's where the similarities ended. No inhalation, no time dilation, and no dark rainbow. Sometimes Dr. R would sit in the observation deck for hours watching it, waiting for the orb to grow suddenly and tear through the room again. But it never did. Most of the tests at this facility were dedicated to figuring out how to send organic material through this entrance. All these failed tests managed to do was expand the size of the entrance, growing it from a near undetectable sliver that you had to stand at just the right angle to even be able to see, to a 4-inch hourglass-shaped inky blob hovering in midair. It took 9 years of testing for that 4-inch blob to develop. It wasn't enough to keep up the funding, and so this program was shut down quietly in 2002. And yet, apparently, the Binks engine didn't go completely dark. Apparently, it pulled what it needed from the natural world around it, just enough to maintain the chamber, which means it maintained that 4-inch entrance to the other side. All this time, Dr. R whispered as he marveled at his creation 2 weeks ago. The only notable change in the building were the thin white roots that grew through the floor of the chamber. They rose like weeds in the concrete, reaching up to that crackling, hovering orb. It was fairly easy to place it all together from there. The two YouTubers broke into the chamber, didn't know how unstable the orb was, and simply touched it. Dr. R found that he couldn't blame them for their curiosity. He was grateful even. He hadn't realized it was Wilmore's organic material, his blood, that had fully opened the gate to the other side. And it had done it again with these YouTubers. Their bones melted and their flesh peeled, and when the cops and the military arrived, it only fed this portal more and invited the hounds to return. Brianna and the group expected to go floor by floor until they found someone, but every floor was the same. Elevator doors would open to rows of cubicles or a conference room or an extensive laboratory, and they would all be cleaned and abandoned. Fluorescent lights would flicker on as they stepped off the elevator and shut off as they stepped back on. Will would call out on each floor a few times. There would be no response. Claire would look for papers or something of interest, but there would be nothing of note. Brianna just grew silent, unsure what this all could mean. The group stopped making small talk about how empty everything was by the time they reached the 5th floor. More of the same, nothing of note, just a building churning along endlessly. Dr. R takes the stairs 2 at a time to reach the observation decks as fast as he can. It's taken him a few days to figure out the right pulsating sequence to draw more people to the building for the engine to feed on, effectively. Does he have the time right now to modify it enough to draw this new group in? He's already in front of his computer before he can finish that thought. The 7 people that made it here were more than enough. Dr. R had promised the authorities not to call anymore to the Binks engine. Apparently 27 citizens was too disruptive, even if only 7 of them managed to reach the building. It wasn't worth it to explain to the police chief that there had been something on the other side that was more than all their mundane lives combined. He just nodded and asked to be left alone to his work. But Dr. R hadn't agreed to not use subjects who walked into the building under their own free will. The group gets off the elevator back at the ground floor. Brianna beelines to the seats near the front door. She flops down and stares at the floor with her head in her hands. The teams meander around a bit, walking around just to walk. Kevin eventually stands near Brianna by the door. Claire half-heartedly looks around, aimless. Will inspects every inch of the lobby, looking under the front desk and peering around the service doors. Fee finally stops pacing and faces the group. "So that's it?" she asks incredulously. "They clearly aren't here," Sunny responds quietly. "Nothing is here," Brianna says, not looking up. Poof, plucked right out of the sky. "Huh?" Will asks as he's looking inside of a trash can. Brianna sighs and lets herself ramble. Nothing about this makes sense. From the very beginning, Tasha might as well have been plucked right out of the sky. This whole thing is weird and I'm tired, man. What the fuck? What do we even do next? She sighs and rubs her temples. She expected to start crying again and found that she was too tired to do that too. Just as well. No one has anything to say for a while. Finally, Kevin shifts his weight. "I guess we hike back then," he suggests. "Yeah, sure," Brianna says, ready to go. Kevin gives a rueful laugh. "Well, at least you're exhausted. Then you say that was your only goal for today?" "I fucked around and got hopeful, didn't I?" Brianna sighs. "You did warn us," Kevin shrugs. This line of joking is too deadpan for Claire and Will, but both of the teens laugh with the same exhausted sarcasm, and it eases the moment. Dr. R looks up at the monitors just in time to see his latest subjects get ready to leave. "Can't have that," he mutters to himself. He swings his rolling chair over to the security monitors, watches them for a moment, and then flips on the intercom. The group preps themselves to leave, drinking water and stretching for one last hike. Will takes out a pack of cigarettes and lights one. Claire stares at him. "What? Who's even here to care?" Claire considers. "You want one?" he asks. "No thanks," Claire sighs. "I wish I had a drink, though." Brianna finally stands up, looking through the brown glass back out to the forest. "Where are you?" she whispers. Behind her, she can hear Kevin explain the sniff your armpit stretch to the teens. It makes her smile a little. You taught me that, she whispers to Tasha. Now tell me where you are so I can tell you that. An announcement chime goes off throughout the building, and before the group can even fully process that, the calming, authoritative voice of Dr. R is heard next. Intruders, please take the elevator to the lower level B and await further instructions. Dr. R repeats himself a few times, then shuts off the intercom. He returns to his computer and punches in a new command sequence for the Binks engine. Back in the lobby, no one moves. What the fuck was that? Fee asks. A security system? Sonny offers. It called us intruders, Claire says. I mean, I guess we're intruding, Will says. Does that guy know what's going on? Kevin asks. Brianna doesn't say anything. She's so tired. She's too tired for the hike back, let alone for whatever tomorrow is going to bring her. She's out of weed. She just wants to lean on Tasha's chest. A thought cuts through all of this, and Brianna looks up suddenly at the ceiling. We've been here a good 20 minutes. Did he see us walk around this whole building and wait till we're about to leave to say something? Her eyes find a security camera right as she finishes. She steps up underneath it, talking to whoever's on the other side. Hey, do you know where my wife is? Dr. R doesn't hear this since he's turned off the intercom. The monitor is still in the corner of his eye, but he's too focused on calibrating the Binks engine for his new subjects. Back in the lobby, Brianna repeats herself a few times and getting increasingly frustrated as she does. Where the fuck is my wife? She nearly yells. Kevin puts a hand on her shoulder and she pulls away. We walked around this whole building before he said anything. We didn't trip some alarm. He's fucking with us. We don't know, Kevin starts. But the time for pausing and rationalizing had long since passed for Brianna. She looks for something heavy within her reach and eyes a blue decorative spear centerpiece on the coffee table. Dr. R had just decided to check if the group had made it down to the chamber right as the spear hit the lobby security camera dead center. Hey, bitch, I know you saw that, Brianna screams. Ironically, of course, Dr. R could not see that now that the camera was broken. He scrambles over to the intercom and makes sure the two-way is on. I beg your pardon, young lady, he shouts back. His voice echoes in the near-empty lobby, a fully disorienting feeling for Brianna, but she yells back before she can let that feeling settle. I beg your fucking pardon. Where is my wife? How the hell should I know? Dr. R responds. Everyone looks at Brianna when Dr. R says this. Her eyes narrow. So why do you want us downstairs then? There's a pause as Dr. R puts together in real time that these people might have some connection to the 7 he already has in the chamber. The silence hangs just long enough for Brianna to look back at the group with a I told you so expression on her face. Finally. Yes, right. I understand. Okay. Please make your way downstairs to the lowest level and everything will be explained. Thank you. Dr. Oz shuts off the intercom again, but slowly this time. It's been a while since he's been questioned so directly, and it throws him off a bit. The 6 look at each other again. The elevator dings open expectantly. What else are we going to do? Will asks the group. No one has a response. One by one, they look over to Brianna. She rubs her temples again. Tell me you have a gun or something, she replies to Will. He shakes his head. You, the action hero, don't have a gun? Fee jumps in. I have a gun, Claire starts before Will can reply. Everyone looks at Claire shocked. What? She asks, just as surprised at their reactions. Nothing. We'll unpack that later. Do you feel good using that thing? Well, Claire starts. Brianna and Fee both sigh. Brianna waves her hand to cut Claire off. Girl, it don't matter. Does someone know how to shoot? And before Brianna can finish the question, Kevin raises his hand. Okay, great. You take the lead then, all right? We don't know what he wants. Maybe Will starts. Okay, fine, whatever. Just be ready, okay? At this, everyone nods and heads over to the elevator. Right as Brianna is about to get on, she sees the stairs nearby. She hesitates. I'm gonna take the stairs, just in case. She doesn't explain further. She couldn't if she wanted to. She just knew that taking the stairs would be the better option. The group exchanges a glance and then follow her lead. They make their way down the spiraling staircase. Intentionally descending into hell, Brianna mutters loud enough for Kevin to nod in agreement. The group goes down 2 flights of stairs and past a large white door with the same opaque brown glass. Brianna stops, causing Kevin to slow down. Will, who's next in line, continues to the next landing before he realizes the two has stopped for an extended time. The rest of the group lands somewhere in between the middle of these two, waiting on Brianna. Brianna just stares into the dark window. He's at the lowest level, Brianna, Will says as gently as he can. Right, she replies, half listening. She steps to the door, closer to the window. She's not sure at first. The lighting is too dark to be sure, so she stares. Finally, Dr. R moves from one end of the room inside to the other. Just shadow, but it's just enough for Brianna. Nah, he's right here. And with that, she bursts through the door. Sometimes, important, once-in-a-lifetime moments in our lives feel like we've experienced them in slow motion. That effect is actually the mind taking in all the information it can at once. Time isn't truly slowing down, but it feels like that because your brain is taking note of every part of the world around you to help you prepare for whatever may happen next. In this case, however, both things were true at once. Dr. R had moved in front of the window because he had received a notification that the Binks engine had hit its final target. The orb was growing. No longer a 4-inch hourglass shape, it grew to the size of a basketball and was nearly as round. Just one raised point at the very top, like a fat teardrop. The orb was nearly perfect, nearly stable. Electromagnetic sparks became less chaotic and instead pulsed in a familiar rhythm. The monstrous hum of the Binks engine fell into this pulsating rhythm too. All was becoming one. And all it took was the organic material of 2 of the 7 subjects he had bound to the Binks engine. He was down to 5 left, and he worried that it might not be enough to fully stabilize the portal to the other side. But with these 6 making their way down now, it had to be enough. Was certainly going to be enough. And so, as he made his way to prepare for these new subjects, Brianna burst into the room and the orb pulled time to a crawl once again. Brianna had to laugh. All this work, all these horrible last few days and last few hours and big grand mystery, all that shit for this fucking dweeb? Brianna, a woman who was tall enough to be asked if she played ball way too often, looked down at the feeble, bitter Dr. R as he swung around in his chair. A shrivel of a man in dingy clothes that he hadn't updated in 20 years. The two stared at each other for what seemed to last forever. "Where is my wife?" Brianna demands. She's speaking slower than she intended, and then realizes in a slow horror that she's moving in slow motion too. Not dramatically yet, just enough to realize that she's putting more effort into moving her feet. Instinctively, she takes a step back. Her foot falls faster back at its normal rate. She puts 2 and 2 together and backs up further. In all his study and all his intense focus, Dr. R hadn't considered what the range of the time dilation effect would mean in practical terms. At some point, the pull of the portal a floor below them would be enough to slow down time throughout the entire forest. But right now, it's only strong enough for objects within a 50-foot radius. And Brianna had just stepped outside of that. "Stop!" He screams at her, the word growing longer and longer in length as time creeps and the pool grows. Brianna quickly makes her way back out and slams the door closed. Okay, do not go in there. Wait, is he in there? Will asks, pushing his way back up the stairs. Yes, but something's wrong, Brianna tries to explain, but Will damn near bulldozes his way in without a second thought. The door swings open, Will takes a step and a half, and then Will lets out as his movements get heavier and heavier. The other 5 look on, just outside of the range of this growing effect. I don't know, it felt like running through jello in there, Brianna tries to explain. Everyone watches as Will very, very slowly realizes what's happening. He's moving at almost half time now, turning his head, then his torso, and finally, so painfully slowly, his feet back towards the door. His eyes bug out wide as he does so, a realization that is also happening in slow-mo in front of the 5. Dr. R does his best to make his way out the second exit closer to the orb itself. He knows the risk, but his window to pull this off was closing. He had to take his chance. He uses his whole body to push himself hard in the rolling chair. It's an efficient but hilarious sight as the 70-year-old man scoots across the room in a slow, exaggerated motion. Sonny points this out to Fee and then stops. You guys, look at the monitors, they yell to the group. All 5 turn to the monitors, and after a few seconds, so does Will. One camera is aimed at the ground of the chamber, and there, on the ground, cocooned in those thin white roots, are 7 people-shaped mounds. It takes Brianna a second to put 2 and 2 together. She pushes her way down the stairs to the base of the chamber. Dr. R stands up as soon as he rolls out of the range of the time pool. He can see the group take the long way down and realizes this is his last chance to know. Stability be damned. He makes his way to the escape ladder and then down about halfway before he stops. He turns his body, an act he finds harder to do as the time pool grows, and stares down at the hovering, cracking portal to the other side. Brianna swings the door of the base of the chamber open and at once is arrested by the sight. The floor is covered in the thin white roots, crisscrossing every way, at least an inch thick off of the ground. Roots come together, or maybe congeal, in the center of the chamber into a massive bone white cone. The tip of the cone reaches towards the hovering black orb in the middle of the room. The orb is almost fully round now and sickeningly awesome to behold. Brianna stops in her track and stares. It's simply beautiful. The most beautiful thing she's ever seen. A gentle swirl of dark rainbow streaking through the pitch blackness of this orb. The hum of the room in rhythm with the swirl's movements. The electricity around dancing in motion. Maybe even her own heartbeat. All in time with this void into nothingness and everything. This one simple tear into something more. An almost spherical orb, just one small peak swaying at the very top, saving it from perfect roundness. A loud but muffled sound right below Brianna snaps her out of her trance. The mounds on the floor, 7 of them. It clicks into place and Brianna kneels down to the one that made the noise at once. She pulls at the white mossy bed, careful to cover her hands this time with her jacket as an impromptu barrier. She tears away blindly, assuredly, and after a few wet, chunky handfuls of white moss had been cleared, "You're alive," Brianna whispers. "You found me," Tasha replies weakly. Brianna pulls away more of that white moss that held Tasha's body down. Brianna nearly frees her by the time the group reaches the chamber. They all pause at the door and stare up at the orb just like Brianna did. Quick on the draw, Brianna spins around to them. "Snap out of it! They're under here! Help me free them!" Brianna screams. Kevin snaps out of it at once and shakes the others to help them come to. The orb crackles on. The group manages to keep their eyes down and begin to dig at the mounds. It's a frantic mad dash to pull away at the moss to free their loved ones. The time pull just starts to reach them, slowing down their movements just enough for the terror to set in as Brianna finally frees Tasha. They immediately hold each other tighter than they've ever had. Brianna's hands move all around Tasha, unable to settle in one place. Tasha is literally drained, but uses most of her strength to hold her wife as tight as she can. They both burst into tears, and beautifully above them, the orb crackles just a little out of sync. And as Brianna helps Tasha to her feet, pulling the last of those white tendrils from her body, the orb crackles violently again. Dr. R climbs halfway down the escape ladder and is now eye to eye with the orb when Tasha gets up. The energy she was being drained for to feed the orb is now severed. Dr. R lets out a scream as he watches the portal lose stability. The group can't be bothered to notice. They all manage to pull their loved ones out of the moss. Tasha, Kathy, Jay, Amanda, and Peter were exhausted. They each had something like chemical burns on the exposed skin of their necks and arms. The horrible inky smell permeated every pore, but they were alive. Which is more than what can be said for the 2 deflated mounds left. The last of the 7 that died nameless in this story, but not in the hearts of their loved ones. The sick luck of the draw. The mossy cone at the center of the chamber is made with the fused bodies and melted bone material of the 2 YouTubers, some guards and soldiers, and others who got too close over the years. But our heroes don't have to know that pain today. They can just run. Dr. R could run too. Was he really considering this? Was it really worth it? A voice from deep within him asked. It was a rational thought, the kind of thought that beneficial scientific discoveries are built on. But as the orb danced and crackled in its instability, as he could see his last opportunity to know, to truly know, fall apart in front of his eyes, he realized he didn't give a fuck about beneficial scientific discoveries. He just had to know. And so the mad scientist leapt into the air from the ladder and used every ounce of his will to reach the orb before it was too late. And it wasn't too late, of course, because time slowed as he fell closer and closer, leaving him plenty of time to remember that the hounds might also want to cross over to his side of the portal too. When Brianna's mind would insist on replaying this moment in the future, she would always marvel about how her first thought was correct. It was logic, that trusty old rationality that tried to tell her differently, at least at first. But whenever she played the moment out in her mind's eye for years to come, the moment was clear. Her eyes weren't deceiving her. A 12-foot-long dog creature came through the smoking, crackling dark rainbow in the black orb. It came out tongue first, long, fleshy tendril tasting the air of a new world. It came through in one smooth, time-defying movement and bit Dr. R in midair with its long, sharp beak. Bit is too polite of a word for it, actually. The creature's beak first pierced Dr. R's torso and then shredded it open as it let out a horrible scream. Brianna did not need to see more. Time to go, y'all, she shouts to the others, and don't look up. Everyone hears her warning but Will, who just has to look, has to know too. He stops for just a moment, little Peter slumped over his shoulder, just a quick moment to look up. and he sees Dr. R's body vivisected in two, lower torso and legs floating gently away from the upper torso and head. Dr. R's eyes open wide in this slow death, staring down at the unbelievable carnage of his dying body. A shower of blood drops surround him like snowfall. This nightmare creature is one beyond our time and gravity, so it bounds along in the air, making its way directly and instinctively towards the surface. Dr. R's upper half, dying but not yet dead, will take in these last moments of his life for the next hour. Dr. R's brain will finally go quiet just as he reaches the orb's edge. Thankfully for Will, his body moves him to the door and to safety before his conscious mind does. He's unable to look away at Dr. R's body parts and blood as it's pulled into the orb slowly, far too slowly. "Watch it," Fee screams as Will runs into her. They pile up right next to the door and it wakes up Peter. "Uncle Will," he asks sleepily, "what's happening?" Peter looks up as he asks, and that finally snaps Will out of it. He covers Peter's eyes at once and pulls him towards his chest tight. "Nothing, little guy. Don't look up. We're getting out of here." The missing, or rather the found, and their loved ones make their way out of the building, huddled together in a loose circle. Everyone is huddled as one, keeping eyes in every direction for whatever may jump out at them. They make their way as the sun begins to set. They still have to make it through the forest. "Gotta close the gate. Keep them in. At least buy us some time," Kevin surmises with Amanda in his arms. Brianna takes in a deep breath for this final trek. Before she can speak, though, Will jumps up. I can run ahead and grab my truck and bring it to the tunnel. That would be quicker," Will excitedly puts together. Brianna starts to protest but then stops. "Yeah, actually, go do that." Will hands Peter to Sunny and darts away. "Let's all get to the other side of the gate," Kevin yells. They scramble up the road and then the embankment the best they can. The sound of the engine from deep inside the building roars on. And then a second noise, something like a high-frequency static, builds on top of it. Tasha makes it to the top of the embankment when she sees where it's coming from. In the last of the sunset light, she can see the hound creature trying to break its way through the front door. Brianna reaches the top of the embankment as well and looks out at the building again. The spidery tongue of the hound stuck to the glass door every time it ran into it. The creature snarls and screams ecstatically cry, doing all it can to rip at this last barrier between them. Finally, the glass gave way in one sudden shudder, and the hound was out. "Brianna!" Tasha shouts from the other side of the gate. Brianna hadn't realized how long she was staring at this moment. She comes back to herself and darts for the gate. The hound below sees her movement. Red globular eyes lock in on her at once. A black mist beneath the creature swirls with the dirt of the valley, kicking up a small sandstorm. Thick spaghetti wiring dances wildly off of its body, pulsating in time with its screams. Brianna and the rest of the group run. They don't wait to understand or to see if the bullets in Claire's gun could stop it. They just run and they hope for the best. And so, they don't see how nature responds to this creature from another world. Just as the one hound before it, as soon as this new one reaches the grass of the embankment, white, thin roots sprout from the ground beneath it. A full defense against this cancer at the core of the forest was generations of evolution away. But these forests adapt just enough to rid themselves of these creatures, to create an immediate poisonous and immediately depleting defense mechanism against this and any intruder. The thin white roots of this forest make their way up the hound's body with little effort, eager to feast. They lock the creature in place, ending its hover and pulling it into the equally hungry soil. The roots thread themselves into a moss blanket that suffocates the creature and makes its body one with our earth over time. By the time the group reaches the end of the tunnel, they have nothing left to give. Fortunately, Will pulled up within a few minutes and they were all able to pile in. Hot, tired, sweating, crying, and exhausted, the group was glad to be close to each other all the same. Brianna hops into the back of the truck and cuddles with Tasha. "Are you okay?" she asks desperately. "I've been better," Tasha replies with a tired smile. "Are you okay?" "No," she returns the smile. Brianna reaches out to Tasha's face, and at first, her index finger feels nothing. For a moment, one last wave of fear builds, but then she remembers that the tip of her finger is still numb from the white, thin roots from before. Brianna reaches out just a little bit further with the rest of her hand, cupping Tasha's face as she leans into it. And that's all it takes for her to find that sensation once again. Brianna takes Tasha into her arms and kisses her for a very, very long time. And that was The Forest. Thank you for supporting this work. Thank you for listening. The Forest was written and now read to you by myself, Jasmine Golphin. It was also recorded in my living room. So if at any point you heard a cat screaming in the background, that's because it's a homebrew production. Have a good night, and thank you for listening.